life and confidence coach Dianna Leeder, and this is my podcast, the Crave More Life Roadshow. It's here we talk about emotional hits and lovingly kicking our own asses to get through them. Just so you know, it always comes down to being your beautiful, sassy self, living and loving from you, no matter what. So join me to hear about the healing journeys of other women, and you just might become a DIY ass kicker too. Hey, DIY ass kickers, welcome back to the Roadshow. Today continues my podcast interviews with the authors of Find Your Voice, Save Your Life 2, Powerful Women, Real Stories. Today's guest is Sharleen Froats, who wrote Chapter 1 called The Lie of Silence, Reclaiming Our Power to Create Through Voice. Sharleen is a business mentor for heart-centered, soul-oriented entrepreneurs who are serving big missions and leaving lasting legacies in the world. With decades of experience in personal and physical transformation, she found that the ultimate expression of creative sovereignty is a purpose-driven life with plenty of cash flow to make a lasting impact. Sharleen is both on Facebook and Instagram. Check out the show notes for how to connect with this amazing woman. So welcome to the Roadshow, Sharleen. Really happy to have you.
Thank you so much, Dianna. It is so good to be here with you live. I am nervous and excited and thrilled to be here with you.
Well, I think that some of those F-bombs will probably take some of the nervousness away. That's my guess. That's my guess.
Sounds good. It's a good prescription.
It totally is. It totally is. Okay, so why don't we start with you telling us a bit about your chapter and why writing it was important to you.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I think the why the writing it feels like a good place to start. And it was like the short answer is that it was a very intuitive connection. And that it was so interesting how it came about because a mutual friend of ours, a mutual connection, whom I hadn't even seen or really spoken to in probably 25 years, we ended up reconnecting on Facebook. I had started this new profile as I was stepping out and using my voice more. And she said, you know what? I think you would be a great fit for this next book that my friend Dianna is doing. And it was just, intriguing. This is really interesting. And so I hadn't thought about writing a chapter or a book or pursuing that on any level, but it was just this intuitive, that sounds really cool. And so I wanted to meet you. And again, just taking like a step at a time, I felt like the connection between us and then also your mission and the work that you do in the world, it was just such a great fit that it felt like a really good opportunity to continue on and expand what I had started about sharing more authentically. And it just felt like a great opportunity to do that. And because too, like I've loved books my entire life. And so have always had this sense that there would be authorship somewhere, but I didn't go out looking for it or pursuing it. And it just arrived with and through you. So that was very fun.
Yeah, and I remember when we met the first time and I felt that connection too. And I love that. I just love it. It's, it's kind of the statement that things will be lined up for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
We will be where we are meant to be.
Yeah. And also too, that it never would have happened if you weren't out there sharing your voice and I wasn't sharing my voice, right? That really, and then that ended up becoming sort of a connection into my chapter is just this awareness that it really is our voice. And if we're not speaking and expressing on some level, that those connections, like how is anybody going to know who or where you are unless you are expressing yourself, right? And so that was, it's interesting, ironic, not ironic, that in both of us speaking, that's where the connections came from.
Yes, that's true. So, and I want to just comment, and we can get into this in a few minutes, but I want to comment that that's very much the direction that you have gone now in your work. So it really is it's synchronicity at its best. And yeah, and I love it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it absolutely is. And, further to the initial question, or the two-part question about then how that informed my chapter, um, because you're absolutely right. It's sort of this big synchronistic picture of everything fitting together, because as I was stepping more into that in my voice, and teaching others to do the same, of course, this project showed up at the same time for me to be able to embody that, to walk the talk, and, to lead myself in that way as well. And the chapter of my book, The Lie of Silence, was really, this pivotal point in my life where I did become aware of how suppressing my voice on any level wasn't cute or humble, or self-deprecating, or whatever, whatever it might be, and that we kind of think of it in a positive way, that it was actually holding back my creations. And it's
Mm.
actually not a very noble thing to do, to hold that back. So that's really, where that chapter came from, kind of that point in my life
Mhm.
where it was, oh my goodness, I'm lying through not speaking up. It's not a noble thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you in a second about more about your what led you, to be in that position. But I'm curious too. What's coming up for me based on what you just said was that I'm not sure that we as women get that. It's not clear to us. It's I can't say that because someone may react, or I could never, I thought about this actually when I was thinking about the whole F-bomb thing. That one point, or maybe still today, there are people that will say, well, no, that's not very ladylike.
Right.
Never a word that I could connect to, but yeah, it's not all that recognizable, sadly. And I hope that really opens up. And I think chapters like yours will help do that.
Oh, I certainly hope so. And I so resonate with that. And even colorful language and that kind of thing, right? Because I mean, my background is I was raised as a very good Catholic girl. So there was not a lot of that. And I do think that, as in terms of our expression, there can be the unconscious version of our expression where energetically, vibrationally, it's not nice. It doesn't feel good. But then when it is a very conscious use of expression and nuance, right, there's a different frequency to that, and it carries very differently. And then also, it might not be right for some people. I have some friends that very definitely do not use colorful language, right? And and then some that definitely do. And so the intention of where our language comes from, in my opinion, is really what guides whether or not it's appropriate, or beautiful, or distasteful, or any of those things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. And that's a great way to describe it.
Yeah.
My simple version of that is simply that if it doesn't work for you, then don't do it.
Right.
But yeah, to really consider that it is an energetic shift,
Yeah.
and you will know if it isn't going to work for you, and you just don't engage. Like I
Right.
suppose, like in any other expression of who you are. Yeah.
I agree. And just, like as a writer yourself, that, and I love language. My mom was an English teacher, so I was raised in a highly verbal household. And so I love the nuances of language. And to me, colorful language is another nuance and access of expression too.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your history that led you up to the emotional hit that
And
happened
I
in your
can
chapter.
tell my lighting is shifting a little bit. So if I further away from the camera back in, then
You,
I'm
you're
trying to
not
dodge the sun.
you're not
Um,
backing away from the question. You're backing away from the sun.
yeah, exactly. So that
Yeah.
I don't look like a ghost. So yeah, it was an interesting convergence of things in my life, for sure. So I had opened a business. I've been an entrepreneur. Well, I say since the age of 5, since I had a lemonade stand, and, and that kind of thing. So I've always enjoyed exchange. I've always enjoyed being able to create my outcomes, right? So, and my dad was an entrepreneur. So, I had actually several people in my family were entrepreneurs. So I think there's just this aspect of, really enjoying sovereign creation to be able to go out and make happen what you desire, right? So I've been an entrepreneur for a long time, and I did the solo thing. I have a degree in exercise science. So where I was first drawn was into personal training, lifestyle counseling, that kind of thing. So I did the solo thing for a while, and then I've been very fortunate, or claiming my gifts, that these things have come relatively easy to me. And so it was just sort of this natural progression of kind of really desiring to challenge myself a little bit further. So I ended up opening a bricks and mortar facility. So I was at that time, this is close to 12 years ago now, I was very into CrossFit. And so that really was speaking to me. And so I wanted to bring that to my community. And so my whole intention was building a fit community. It was something I was lit up by, so I wanted to share it. So I opened this facility, once again, very, very successful for the first years, just like growth over growth over growth. And then came this point where, because I was receiving coaching and I loved it, I loved being involved with the coaching side of it. And that's really, it kind of lit me up. It was like one of those new things where you go, ooh, this is very cool. And then that was something that I wanted to pursue. I decided I would love to help coach other fitness business owners and help them in the way that I had been helped. So I became a coach with the company that I was working for, or that I was a client of. And I started coaching other entrepreneurs. And it was this point, and I loved it. It was just sort of a next step in my evolution. And simultaneous to that, so I was having less and less and less interest in coaching individuals on fitness, health, and lifestyle. I was losing interest in my business while this new passion was being ignited. And I had never been in that kind of a position before, because I thought that once you found your passion, that was your passion for the rest of your life. And that you just, like, oh, yay, I found it. And then I'm going to do that forever. What I've since learned.
No,
not for some of us. And this is what I learned. This is what I've since learned as I've unpacked all of this this falls into human design, is that there are some of us in human design called manifesting generators that are literally built to pivot and to explore things. Are you a manifesting generator?
I am. Yeah.
There you go. Right. There's another connection for us.
There it is.
You know what your profile is? Like your numbers?
I don't. Oh, okay. That's all I know. I need to look at it some more. It's so fascinating.
So the manifesting generators, what I've since learned is that we master things quickly. So it explained how every time I did something, it was rapid mastery, and then I would kind of lose interest. So that would confuse me. I thought there was something wrong with me, right? And also part of my profile is that I'm designed to literally learn by experience. I affectionately call it being a perpetual toddler, that I get in and I try things and then I fall on my ass a bunch of times. And that's how I learn, right? But it's this rapid mastery and then being ready to move on. And I didn't realize that could be a thing. So I had all of this sort of heavy shame around that, thinking I was flaky, thinking that I was ungrateful for this beautiful thing that I had built. So I tried to look for ways to hold on to it. And, I think there can be shadows of greed in that too. Like, oh, I can have this, I can hold this, I can have the egoic expression of, sure, I have this business that's running by itself and I do this. I think there's a little bit of that involved with it at the time too. But at the end of the day, it was discovering a brand new passion and not knowing how to let go of the old. And then suppressing those desires so much. And that what ended up happening, because I was even I still have this picture, I was even lying to myself about what I wanted. And I was getting increasingly distressed about this. So I remember having this conversation with my coaches, the one coach, And he had no idea what to do with me. So he brought in reinforcements, right? And I still have this image of having these two coaches in front of me in Zoom, and they're going like, well, what do you want? And I'm bawling. I'm like, I don't know what I want. And they're like, you have to know, you know? And so it was just like, nobody knew what to do with me. I didn't know what to do with me. And so it was just this process of like, so what happened there is like my suppression of like if I really admitted it, and I remember even saying this to the one coach, is like, I don't want to do XYZ, but I thought that was like blasphemy. Like, I don't want to jump back into operations. I don't want to fix this. I don't want to rebuild a team. Like, I don't want to do any of that. But I thought like, well, if you're a good business owner, you know, you do this, you work hard, you stick with it when things are tough. Like, so there was all of these shoulds rather than really trusting, I'm ready to pivot and it's okay to move on to do something else.
Yeah.
So in my holding on to that, like everything unraveled. It was like, and this is in the chapter, like over about 2 paragraphs, I explain like all of the stuff that it started to get bizarre, the things that were showing up in my life, the things that weren't working well, where for the previous 5 and 6 years, it was just synchronicity after synchronicity and growth and expansion and fun and newness and all of this. And then when I suppressed myself, it just unraveled piece by piece by piece until like it was, I had to rebrand the whole business. I had to rebuild it up. I had to rebuild a team because, like, for example, I had a team of 10, and over a period of like 3 months, they all left the city and left the business for one reason or another. And it's like, you can't make that up. Right.
Yeah.
And then like the bizarre things that would happen. And I was just holding on tighter and tighter and tighter until I was operating this massive business essentially by myself, thinking I was a good, hardworking girl. And that put me into adrenal fatigue. And then, so like just everything unraveled all at the same time. And like, so it was just like the universe saying, okay, you're not going to follow your heart's desires. We'll just start showing you the result of that. And it ended up being, you know, I couldn't get out of bed until noon. Like I couldn't exercise. Nothing I did nutritionally helped my body to respond. Like all of my tools disappeared for what I understood how to create the life I want. I was sick, exhausted, and nothing was working.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a tough time.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. Yeah. And it's interesting that, you know, when things did start to break down, that you took complete responsibility for that and you jumped in and started to do it all yourself. And, you know, maybe relative to the business, maybe that was just the necessary thing to do in the moment. But it is interesting that it's, you know, you kind of, it's like when things start to fall apart, we fill the gaps.
Yeah.
Even if we're exhausted.
Right. And I would imagine that you've probably seen that in many scenarios, not just with a business owner, right? Like for women to just, well, this isn't happening, so let me jump in and do that rather than stopping. I mean, how would you coach somebody through that to stop and, you know, to really evaluate what they actually want in that moment?
Yeah. Well, and you know what, when you think about it from a coaching perspective, you have to, I mean, it's a lot broader than just that question, right?
Oh, sure.
What's your purpose? You know, that's it. Know it and be clear about it. And that's your purpose forever.
Right.
So, you know, there's just so much more to us, but it just strikes me that you know, that's our go-to place. It's always our go-to place. Oh, okay, this, you know, I've somehow made this happen, or I'm not being as successful as I thought I was going to be. So I better get in and fix it. You know, the actual adrenal fatigue is actually a really big one with women that see me. I've experienced it myself. Yeah.
And, you know, since I've started sharing about it, when I started to share about it, the number of private messages I got about, I'm going through this too. Like, you know, what did you do to help this? And how did you recover? All of that kind of thing. I would say, you know, like, I don't want to necessarily use dramatic language, but I would say, you know, it's kind of a silent epidemic among women. Like general exhaustion, and then diagnosed adrenal fatigue and things like that. It's more prevalent, I think, than anybody is admitting.
Yeah, I agree. And it's not a real easy fix. You can't just simply take a pill or take a supplement or, make one small shift. That's I think from my experience with my clients, it really is about that whole bigger picture that, so it's not just your purpose, right? It's all these other things, how we respond to beliefs that are really not serving us, things like that. Understanding our human design. So many pieces are in there. It probably took me, I don't know, I'm going to say a good 3 years to actually physically recover.
Yeah, I would absolutely echo that too. I mean, from the moment that I understood what was happening to me and I had to back off, and then slowly building recovery, yeah, I would say probably a solid 3 years before I would say that I felt like some of my old vitality was returning. And that was shocking to me too. Like it's a big error in a way, like it's a pretty severe illness, in terms of impact and recovery on it. Yeah. And I totally agree with all of the aspects involved in healing. There's the physical support that you need for sure, but there's mental components, emotional components, spiritual components, your beliefs, your paradigms, because that was really what I had found, is that, yeah, this was the symptom, this is the end symptom, but what were the 47 warning steps to that? Like, I kind of equate that to almost being on the top of a cliff, where you take a step to the right, no big deal, everything's fine. A step to the right, no big deal, everything's fine. And you keep stepping, everything's fine. And you just don't realize that the next step is off a cliff, right? So it's not that one step, it was the 47 steps before that led you to that point. And so unpacking all of that, and for me, it's been so willing to not even take a single step, because I didn't realize how important the tiny gives were, the tiny, ignoring the tiny yeses that weren't really yeses. They don't seem like a big deal until you fall off the cliff.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit, because that kind of takes us into how you did end up healing from that piece. So tell me about some of those tiny steps that you had to go in for.
Yeah. Where to start with that? I probably would say one of the more significant ones was incorporating rest as part of my lifestyle, part of literally who I was and how I live, because I feel like I had it backwards. And being a manifesting generator who's just loves doing things, right? Do, like, that's fun. And then if it's just missing a tiny cue of rest, then it builds and becomes an issue. So now my life is actually built around rest, and then activity gets scheduled, where I probably had it the total opposite before, that it was, I open my eyes and go, right? And I even remember the first nutritionist that I worked with, who was a specialist in adrenal fatigue. I remember sending her one update, because one of her prescriptions to me, this was the hardest prescription. I'm like having memories here. Rest 2 times a day for 20 minutes. Like, that was ridiculous to me, to do that, to stop and do nothing, to meditate, to nap, to whatever. That was a prescription, do rest two times 20 minutes. And I remember at one point saying to her, I'm feeling so good, I didn't even need to nap. And she was like, that is not the point.
Damn. Thought you had it. Yeah, I love that though. I love that. That's such a great prescription, really.
Yeah, it was pivotal. It was pivotal to me. And now my life is like, and then I had to build that more and more, because then there's this underlying anxiety to it that I didn't realize that I had, that I think a lot of us do, is that when I learned that people with an overactive nervous system who trend towards anxiety tend to solve it with activity. So when we start feeling anxious, we do more, which just exacerbates it, right? And so as I did less, I noticed the drive to do more like was more prevalent. So then it was becoming aware of that internal anxiety and working with that rather than, my coping mechanism of doing things, which works to a degree. It's why we get rewarded so well initially, right? The doers get rewarded until we get sick.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it's hard to tell a woman to not trust those those behaviors that she's had for so long. It's really, really hard. And when you think about it, well, and what else kind of goes up against that wall, in my mind is the whole issue of self-care, so that's a big deal now. At one point it really wasn't. It was, it was just, it didn't really have a name.
Right.
Now, it does have a name, but I think sometimes the term itself leaves out what you're talking about, all those little nuances that all have to be taken care of, including rest.
Yeah.
It's, we need all of it that nourishes us first.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So true. And I would say the other thing, that was to the rest for sure, as you're saying. And then the other thing for me, like the lies were my no. Those were my biggest lies, were my no's, right? Because it's easy to say yes. It's easy to do and to be excited and to biff around. But what I started to, and had the opportunity to essentially resolve this in my personal life and in my marriage a few years before, and I hadn't realized how much of that was built into my business, because I had this perception, and got all kinds of messaging, right? As a strong female, just in general, all kinds of messaging as a youngster about being a bitch, right? About being demanding and hard to work with and all of those kinds of things. So I had almost swung to the opposite end of the spectrum of like, everything is about internal alchemy and, shifting my internal state. And so if I just shift on the inside, everything else will be okay on the outside, right? But sometimes the whole reason is to say, fuck no, like, no, you can't have this. No, you can't do this.
Absolutely.
And that was really where I was struggling, because I was afraid that if I say no, in particular to team members, I'd gotten really good at great boundaries and standards with clients, but then running a large business, I was not good about that with team members, because I had this fear of, if this one pillar goes, I suffer a negative consequence. So I danced around stuff with team members like far beyond anything else. And then it ended up falling apart anyways, because I wasn't being authentic. I was letting all kinds of stuff slide that I really shouldn't have, and had firm boundaries around. So that was my no was my lie. When it's like, no, this is not happening. I was like, well, then I'm a bitch and I'm not, being generous enough and all of those things. So that's really where it unraveled for me.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
It's funny. I just did a blog post last week about this relative to how we negotiate with ourselves. When we shouldn't. Let's stop negotiating with ourselves. Let's stop having those conversations. Let's just realize that when we set a boundary, and we set it with intention and honesty and pure honesty based on what we need, as opposed to those beliefs or our historical responses, then we friggin' stick to it. It is about, it's there for a reason. It's not there to argue in our head about, I can do it this one more time, or they really need me. No, I love you, whatever you need to say. No, it's still a no. Yeah.
And that's definitely been in most recent years, probably my hardest path. I mean, even with my children, I'm raising a teenage daughter we have an older son and a teenage daughter, and we love our children more than life itself. And this beautiful little, very strong-willed being that I just want to give everything to really challenges me to stay in my no, right? And to even teach the next generation of women how, because I also really believe we've adopted this from a patriarchal culture, that we start to treat other women the same way without realizing it.
We do.
We hope that other women are going to loosen their boundaries for a specific request, if we ask nice enough, right? That we hope that other women are going to loosen their boundaries and things like that. And so that's definitely been my biggest learning curve, is saying no. And I would say where it really showed up is the people that are closest to me, the people that I care most about, I had the hardest time saying no to. So I care so much about my team. I care so much about my family and my children. Those were the places I had the hardest time saying no in. And that's where I ended up paying the biggest price, for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, they're the people that I think because you care so much about, they're the ones that you really don't want to disappoint for a variety of reasons, right? Yeah,
exactly.
I hear you. Yeah. I don't think there's a woman alive who doesn't consider that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah. So, what is life like for you now? Now that you've kind of gone through that and you've healed and yeah.
So good, Dianna. So good. It was yay. Yeah, it is, seriously, it's so good. And it's funny that I just spoke about my daughter. She asked me a question yesterday or the day before. So she's going for her driver's license tomorrow morning. So we've been out. She's a very conscientious child. So we've been going out practicing. And as we're driving along, we're having bits of conversation. And she said to me, she's like, don't take this the wrong way. I'm like, oh, this is going to be interesting. She's like, don't you get bored? She's like, you're at home like all the time. So this is her impression of my life at this point, because my life previously was, where's mom? Mom was never really around, right? And so she's like, and you're here all the time now. And so initially there was this, she's like, don't you have somewhere to go? Like there was an adjustment for her.
Yeah.
Her impression of me is that I'm home all the time. But what it is that I'm available whenever, my family needs, because that's my priority. And it feels to me now, like the last 2.5 years since I decided to close my business, and I had that final awareness of, oh, well, this is what I wanted to do for 3 years now. I closed my business. And so for the past 2.5 years, genuine commitment to living entirely by flow, like to the voice within, without having a grand master plan of how it's all going to come out, genuinely honoring who I am, what I feel, what I want. And so I literally feel like I've been on vacation for 2.5 years, even though I've been simultaneously building a business and serving my clients and loving what I do. It feels like a vacation now. My life feels like a vacation now.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. I love that. So how do you stay in that flow? So, I mean, we talked about the non-negotiating and saying no, but to actually stay in that flow, because there are so many women that are challenged with their own stuff, but also the demands of others, clearly. And even someone saying, you need a purpose right now.
Yeah.
Do you need a purpose right now? I don't think so. It will come. Like
Right.
That's my take, right? It will come. It will be whatever it needs to be. But how do you stay there?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So, I mean, the first piece that I would love to illuminate is, in some of this awareness that I've built and come to understand, is that part of the codes that I carry is to demonstrate to others that you are safe to leap. And so when I closed everything down, I had no plan, like nothing. So what I picked up a little bit in the question is that sometimes we're in such a hamster wheel that if somebody ever had dared to say something like, well, you can set it all down. It's like, well, no, I can't. This and this and this and this and this, right? So there is a level to which, yes, I believe you can set the entire thing down and you will be cared for. Because when you move in faith that the universe rises to meet you. Not everybody is ready to do that, but I'm living proof that it is possible. So there's that. Yeah. And then the other piece about how I maintain that is, and it's interesting, I was thinking about this conversation I had with a dear friend very shortly after I closed my facility. And I was talking about the level of emotional awareness that I live with 24/7. So that right now, and my answer might change down the road, but in terms of how I'm living it and operating right now, that how I feel physically in my body and what comes up is literally my path. So I can't, if I suppress anything or just move on or bypass it or use a coping mechanism, that I'm just repeating the pattern. And so it literally is, okay, this emotion has come up. I've got 17 things still that I want to do. Okay, but I need to be here and understand and move through this emotion, alchemize this emotion. This is literally my work right now. And then I move on. And I remember talking to my friend about this. And coincidentally or not, this was a friend who was recovering from a bout of breast cancer and who had been through a major stressor herself and cancer and recovery. And I shared this with her, and her reflection was, that sounds like a lot of work. And, I was like, oh, that's interesting. But the thought is that literally is our work. And if we don't do that we end up with so many negative consequences and outcomes. That what would you rather do the mental and emotional work, or deal with physical manifestations and issues that are way worse? So it's really, like I would say, paying attention to my emotions first and foremost has been my number one.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Love it. Love it. I think that's really important. Absolutely. It's the, it's the emotion, it's the body, it's the feels.
100%.
Yeah.
And that was, my path. My entire life was almost priding myself on being able to suppress pain and discomfort to be able to continue on. The pain and discomfort never deterred me.
Yeah.
When I had no idea, my body's signals were literally the path that I am best served to pay attention to.
Yeah. Makes me think about, and congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
It's a really big deal, and it's, that's something that you've done for you, and you will benefit. The people around you will benefit. The people that you're working with will benefit. It's huge. It's not, it's not a little piece. It's a really big piece.
It's a major shift, right? It is 180 degrees difference from how I used to operate.
Yeah.
It was a major shift for me. And it's, I think this really speaks to your next project, is that it essentially, what I went through was a deep spiritual awakening, right? You come to the end of when your operating system no longer works, there's a dark night of the soul. It was a major spiritual awakening for me. So your next book is going to be amazing.
I think so. Yeah, for sure. And yes, I think that, and the spiritual piece is almost another hurdle for many women. They, oh no, that's not me. That's not what I'm about. I don't get it. I'm not that person. I kind of believe, but I don't believe, or whatever it is. So to allow yourself to be open to whatever is there is such a gift, such a huge gift. Yeah.
Well, it was really disconcerting for me too. Like as this was happening in conjunction with this, losing interest in what I was currently interested in, and these new things. Like I was getting spiritual downloads of having been on other planets and other lifetimes, and being completely freaked out about what is happening to me, and this was in the recovery with adrenal fatigue, and having some of these things emerge, and just having no idea what to do with all of this newness that was flooding in, for sure. So it can be very disconcerting, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, especially if you've never gone there before.
No.
Which is really the purpose of the book, actually. Yeah,
I love that.
To be able to have, same thing as with two, have the opportunity for women to write their stories. And I tell you, some of these stories are powerful. But
I'm so excited.
Yeah, me too. But then to also have, have those stories that other women can read. Same concept again as to, have a read, because there's going to be something that you will connect with. And if it opens you up in any way, then it's, our job is done. Yeah.
So true. And it's that normalization, right? Because I remember having a lot of those feelings too, about feeling weird or isolated, afraid to kind of speak about, what I was experiencing, because again, that deep Catholic upbringing, right?
Mhm.
Some of these things that I was experiencing were considered sacrilegious, right? And even just culturally odd and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's to normalize that, and because I think it's happening, it's accelerating. So and so I think that's really important work for sure.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing work-wise, what you're doing in the world. And I understand you have a new program that's coming up just in a couple of days.
I do. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, all of that big experience, came to, a few years ago, just understanding that I really loved entrepreneurship. And I think this is, part of where my love of physical transformation came from. It's about being able to create the outcomes in our lives that we want, like having some control, some sovereignty over this. And a big part, I believe, of what holds a lot of people back is the ability to generate really good revenue, right? Because revenue is the tool of exchange on our planet right now, like it or not, right? So the more revenue we can generate, the more impact we can have, the more people we can bless with what we're doing. And women are becoming entrepreneurs at a greater rate than ever before. And so I really became passionate about that, about helping entrepreneurs really make a very abundant life for themselves. And so right after I closed my business, because I was doing business coaching for another company, synchronicity arose, and I immediately had requests from friends to help, and even my former mentors, to help them with their businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked privately. And then just a few months ago, I was finally ready to speak more publicly. I cocooned for a couple of years, and just a few months ago, I was ready to speak more publicly about this and begin offering my services publicly. And so I work with entrepreneurs, heart-centered, soul-oriented entrepreneurs who understand the metaphysical, understand that there's more to us than our physical body and just strategy, structure, and implementation, and who really want to pull their divine self into their third dimensional manifested form to be able to have a life and revenue that really works for them. And so the area that I have found myself focusing on most recently, not having a huge plan, but what's emerged, right, has been really helping entrepreneurs with their authentic voice. Because it's kind of like they come with a basket of Lego or parts and don't know what's connected to what.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not about learning a strategy, a system, or a method, but it really is just about making connections between who they are naturally, and it just explodes out of them in a way that feels really natural, and then the revenue follows, which has been so much fun. So the offer that I have is what I would consider a really beautiful little masterclass that I did. It's called Voice, appropriately, because I partnered that with my time with the book. And I've got, I think it's approximately 6 hours of content. So we go over not only some of the 7 deadly sins of social marketing, but then how to fix that, how to connect your voice, how to speak authentically so that your social channels, which is where most of us are selling and doing business from, really become a hub, an opportunity to sell really well through your business. And so that masterclass is normally $333. And I'm offering it for the listeners to this podcast for $111, and that's available until next Friday. So I'm doing another free masterclass this Friday. And so I'm highlighting everything that I've done over the past 6 months to create a business from soul and intuition and desire and feeling only. I'm giving it all away, no holds barred, doing that on Friday. And then this masterclass offered, the voice masterclass, is available for $111 until next Friday.
Wow, which is the 3rd, September the 3rd. Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. It sounds fantastic.
Oh,
yeah.
thank you. I'm so glad.
I'm going to try to show up this Friday for sure.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Well, the recording will be there for a week, so
Awesome.
no pressure on live attendance. It'll be there to enjoy for a week.
Awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Love it.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Oh, Sharleen, thank you.
Thank you so much.
You've not just given us all kinds of information, but I'm really grateful that you opened up as much as you have. I think that's just what we connect with. So
Yeah.
I'm really grateful that you did that, and great conversation. We probably could have talked for another 2 hours, but
I totally could have. And thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to do this, for the book opportunity. I mean, you putting together a collection of people for this opportunity is amazing. The work you do is incredible. I'm so grateful to have been connected with you and had the opportunity. It's a gift that keeps giving for me. And then to connect with you on this podcast, my first ever podcast, my nerves mostly went away.
Very good.
So I'm still breathing and upright by the end of this. So you did a beautiful job in helping me feel very comfortable. So I'm so appreciative.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, you know what? I'm sending you all kinds of love because you've got a big world to impact, and it's going to be fantastic.
Thank you so much, Dianna. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
So listeners, thanks for joining us today, as usual. And I want to remind you that just by listening, you're kicking your own ass. You are opening yourself up to somebody else's story that may just help you on your own journey. If you're looking for some support to find and use that precious voice of yours, check out my one-to-one coaching or group program. You'll get what you want when you find your voice. Spoiler alert, it's all about your relationships. See you next time. If you like today's podcast, hit subscribe at the bottom on your way out, and come find me at cravemorelife.com for even more DIY ass kicking.